presentation, this is really more just so that you can refer back to it later on when you go to create your own proposals and you start trying to remember how things go together. So I'm going to go through this really quickly, but I'm going to start with a blank screen and show you exactly how I would create a proposal from scratch that looks really beautiful, that can also convert clients for you. Let me just go back, just let somebody else in. I need like a co-presenter today. Okay. So I'm assuming you guys are all Dubsado users here, but we are going to talk about how to create beautiful proposals in Dubsado, but you don't know how. If you are confused about how to get proposals to function properly, or if you've spent a lot of time trying to get the design to look right, but you're still not happy with it, or maybe you feel like you have low conversion rates, the layout's confusing, it's not a clear call to action, and your clients are having trouble getting the form completed. Or potentially you're brand new to Dubsado and you want to see what Dubsado can do. If any of those sound like you are in the right place today. We're going to cover all of that. So if we haven't met yet, we have a lot of new faces here today joining. My name is Kelly McCracken. I am a certified Dubsado specialist. I'm a former teacher. I was a second grade teacher and I turned business owner. During the pandemic, I just was like, I can't do this anymore. It was just too much. And I always say I didn't want the Sunday scaries anymore. So I started learning Dubsado for myself. And here we are 3+ years later. I've been helping hundreds of business owners set up their Dubsado accounts. So I live just north of Boston. I am a mom to an 18-month-old girl. I am a dog mom, a wife, and a big fan of chocolate-covered peanut butter. Those Justin's peanut butter cups get me every time. I also come from a family of small business owners. So I know just like you guys, you're doing all of the things, you're juggling everything, and you may or may not have time to do this, and this sort of falls to the back burner. So I'm hoping today feels a little more inspirational to be like, okay, I'm going to set this time aside to do for myself, because I know that's hard to do. So first and foremost, why do beautiful proposals even matter? We could just send the, PDF or the document and just say like, here are my packages, and your clients can respond back to them and say what they want. It does the exact same thing, right? But I do think that first impression matters. And if your proposal is matching your branding and your website as much as possible, it really does make it really seamless for your clients. Most of you probably have spent a lot of money also on branding and on proposals and on websites. So carrying that through to all of your other touch points can really make a big difference. We want to increase your bookings as well and make it easy. Sometimes we get so in our heads and make it really complicated. And what ends up happening is then people are confused, and we want to make it easy for them to just say yes and book with you and move forward. I also like proposals though as well, because we can really set the boundaries and expectations of exactly what you're going to do for them, exactly how you communicate with them, the exact timeline of projects, without having to overextend yourself as well. And I think this is one of the things that sets Dubsado apart as some of the other CRMs out there. This is probably one of the best features, is the proposal, contract, and invoice that you can send to your clients, that you don't then have to continue to like customize and change contracts every time or set up invoices every time. The proposal really sets you up to have that done for you based on the package that your client selects. So not to say that you can't still send custom quotes or customize things, but personally, I think this is the best feature in Dubsado and the most time saving of it all. So you might be a multitasker like me, and you're going to go in and work on this while you're listening to this, and that's totally fine. Or if after the fact, I want you to do these things first. So before you start setting anything up in Dubsado, we need to set up your packages. Before we start setting up a proposal, we need to have packages created. So I linked here, I'll share this with you later. You can also Google this if you haven't done this yet, exactly how to do that in Dubsado. One of the things I see people forget a lot though is to add on categories to your packages. Your categories are going to be really helpful for you to be able to see how much money you're making off of each package that you're selling. So in this example over here for a photographer, If they have collection 1, 2, and 3, I would probably label the categories as collection 1, collection 2, and collection 3. The reason then is that in that reporting tab, you can go in and see like what your most popular package was for the year and sort of track how much income you're making off of each service. I would probably do the same thing down here as well for these specific packages. You could actually go back and see how much money you made. It's definitely not a must, but it is something I just wanted to mention because people often overlook that. And if you look inside of your packages, you probably did overlook that. The next thing you have to do is create a payment plan. If we're sending one proposal to your client, we can only have one payment plan set up and connected. Now, there are like tons of like quirky workarounds that you can do to like have someone select a different payment plan, but really try to craft your packages in a way that it's going to make sense for no matter what they select, they're going to pay the same retainer and then be on the same payment plan beyond that. So no matter which collection is selected here, let's just say, for example, they're going to spend $1,000 as their retainer. You can also do it as a percentage if you wanted it to be 30% of whatever package they selected. But those things need to be set up first before we start designing a proposal. The other big mistake I see is in contracts. Your contracts should not have any open fields in them. So any of those short answer fields or full response, I think they're called, they need to be in your proposal itself. So if we need to collect more client information, we want to do it on the proposal. So then when they get taken to the contract, everything is filled in using smart fields. And it's a real true like PDF document that your clients cannot edit or change. So I will show you how to do that today to make sure that we're collecting that inside of the form and then get it carried over to the contract. Oh, and then I was going to mention too, try to keep that contract universal so that the packages that you create are actually saying like, this is the service that I'm going to offer. So let's say like for this example here, collection 1 has, let's say it's 7 hours of wedding day coverage and they include an engagement session. The description of your package is what we want to carry over to the contract to say this is exactly what's included. So the prep work of all of this is really, really important. Okay, the next one is a lot more fun. So making sure you have all of your branding information collected will just make this process a lot smoother. So you don't have to keep going into like different tabs and trying to find things. It's all right here for you. So I just find the easiest way is I write my hex codes down on a sticky note next to me. I put them on my computer so I know exactly which color I am using. I'll usually write down exactly what it is too. I usually collect about 20 images. So these are sort of like the best images that you'd like to showcase to your clients. So if you do, you know, we keep talking about wedding photography, but really any kind of photography or any sort of service-based business, pick some from different collections or different things to really showcase a variety of work. These things can also be changed out and personalized for each client that you send them to. It's really easy to change out photos if they wanted to highlight or see something specific. But for this instance or this case today, just think of generally designing a proposal that has images that sort of flow together. I would recommend picking some that are landscape and portrait, as well as some just like sort of generic stock images. Sometimes we want them as like backgrounds to things or layered behind text. So this will show you how to do that. And then currently we can only use the fonts that are available in Dubsado unless you are using code. So these, I put them down at the bottom here. These are the fonts that are currently available. You can try to find one that matches yours as close as possible. Sometimes these are your fonts and it works out great. I'll show you in the example what I'm going to do with these fonts today. But I did link here, if you are curious about how to add in your fonts with code, it's actually not as intimidating as it seems. You could definitely do it. I linked the directions here, which I'll share with you so you can play around with that when you get a little more advanced. But this is our mood board for today. So this is the person that I had in mind. I'm thinking of a social media manager who's going to be sending 3 packages to her clients. I'm going to use the Playfair display as my heading. And then this is the Montserrat, just 2 different ways. So this is it with all caps and bolds. and then the body font. And then I'm using this, I think it's called Pinion, something like that. I have to go back and look. Yes, Pinion script is my sort of like accent font that I'm using. So try to have these things in mind before we jump into the next step of designing. So generally, I'm following the same structure of any proposal that I create. There's some sort of header at the top with your logo or some sort of like, yes, this is me, this is my brand. It could be a variation of one of your logos, but making sure that they know this is coming from you right away. Then crafting an introduction that speaks to your client's problems. So not just telling them more about you. Most often they've already gotten on the phone with you or they're in touch with you, but really talking to your client. How can you address the problem that they're having and what you're going to solve there? We can do that a lot of different ways. We can lay that out a little bit differently, but trying to keep that in mind as that initial talking point. That's also probably going to be a place where you can customize it for each client as you send them out. Then again, what to expect when working with you. How do they pay? What is this next thing that will happen once they've booked with you? Tell them exactly what the steps are going to be. Then I usually lay out the services or the packages. I do like to remind everybody to start with the most expensive. It's called a price anchor. You can look it up, and it's kind of an interesting sort of psychology behind it, but it lets people know everything that you would include in some of your packages. And then from there, they can sort of see the lower tier options, but you're sort of giving them that like best option first, and then they can go down from there. But trying to remember to put that first as your very first package that people see. You could definitely add in a la carte options. That doesn't work for everybody, but sometimes it does work. So I'll show you today how to do that. We'll use smart fields as much as possible so that your proposal will still feel personalized without you having to go in and make those changes every single time. Try to sprinkle in a few testimonials. Like I said, at this point, they've probably already gone through the point of seeing your website and talking with you. So you don't need to go crazy, but it is a nice little way to either add like a screenshot of something that somebody has sent to you, or like, you know, just sort of sprinkling in some words that other people have done as social proof. And then an FAQ section if you'd like. I don't always include that, but again, depending on your business, that may make sense or be helpful at this point in the booking process. And then we want to give them the next steps on how to book, collect their details, and then usually some sort of footer. Usually that's pretty simple of just like, you know, can't wait to work with you. Please let me know if you have any questions. And it gives them that little hint of your brand colors again. So I'm going to show you how to do these things, the containers and the GIF. This is just for you for later on, and some examples to refer back to, some ideas. But we're going to get right into Dubsado, and I am going to show you exactly what we're going to create today. So this, using that mood board example that I was showing you, I created this in Dubsado, and I'm going to recreate this completely from a blank screen today. So you'll see here we have our header, that introduction. I always use Ross and Rachel as my like little test project. So you'll see Rachel Green here. This is where we can customize for each client's current challenges and the goals that you'll help them reach. Here's how our packages will be displayed. Some social proof and results. Testimonial, and then a little behind the brand here and next steps. Do we have any questions about that before we get started? All right, awesome. Let me just come back to the meeting for a second. Nothing in the chat. Okay, awesome. All right, so please feel free to stop and ask questions along the way here, but I am just gonna open up a brand new one and we'll go from there. All right, so when we're creating a new proposal, the biggest thing or the biggest key to making everything look good is this element called containers. So the containers are going to allow us to control how things are displayed on the screen, like how big they are, how small things are, and we can also layer them. So that's what's giving that sort of like extra, almost like website look to the form, is when we can layer things on top of each other. I just don't want to forget to say this, so I'm going to say it now. If we put a container here, and let's just say I put an image in on the background, let me just use this one as an example. It's not going to stay like that. We have to have something inside of the container. So if I save this and I go to preview it, you'll see that it's blank. So if you are finding that that's happening, it's probably because you don't have anything inside the container. You can choose from anything, an image, a text box, anything like that, but it has to be something inside of that container. So let's make that header first. So when I select that container here, I'm just going to use this one container, and I like them to be big all the way across. They're always going to default to this like no number here. It's like 98%, but I always drag this to 100% to make it big and wide. And I'm going to actually change this to one column here because I want to pull in that logo image at the top and then maybe introduce, you know, say proposal 4 or X, Y, and Z, something like that. So I'm going to add an image on top so that I can add in my logo. So did you see how that got like really big? That's because the image itself has a lot of white like background space. So again, if you're finding that that is like messing with your design or making it really big, you may need to go back into Canva or wherever your images are from and remove some of that white space around. If I choose a different one, that one also has it, but I think I have a smaller one here that you'll see like it's not going to make it as big. So let me do the background image here. So you can't add videos to a Dubsado form, but you can add a GIF, which is really nice. If you search like iStock or anywhere that you can get free videos, you can download them, upload them into Canva, and then you can actually just download it as a GIF. I did give you those directions there, but it's kind of a nice way to make it look like it has some movement and some like dimension behind your video and just give that little extra like wow. So you'll see this one because it's like a little, it was like a much bigger image that I kind of shrunk down. It's a little bit blurry there and I don't want it to be blurry. So I'm going to use this thing called the image opacity over here. And it's going to add on a little layer there. So it can make the logo pop a little bit more, but the background image is sort of hidden behind it. Let me actually switch this back. I'm going to click back on this image here. I'm going to go back to this one. Okay. You can also change that color as well. So if you wanted it to be, let me just pick a different color that I have here. I'm going to click back on the container and the settings for that container will come up again. So let's say I'm going to do, it can just add another layer of like your branding colors there as well. So you can make this as dark or as light as you want it to be. Do we have any questions about that so far?
The only question I have is on the GIFs that you were talking about. Is that only some stuff that you can get from online? But let's say Nikki has, you know, some kind of a little run. Can I just take that in via Canva?
Yep.
You can, right? Doesn't matter.
Yes. Let me actually see if I can, if I share this tab here instead. When you just go to download, it's an option as instead of like a PNG. Can you see my Canva account there? Yes. Okay. So this, see how it says GIF? So yeah, if you had one, you could absolutely do that. Any other questions about that? All right, we'll keep going. So let me show you that in preview. So, oops. So you'll see how it's full screen on the background, and we have that little layer on the top. So I do like to acknowledge the client's name, or if we're talking about weddings again, like we acknowledge their like wedding date or their venue location. So for this example, I don't want to actually put it inside of the header itself, but I could if I wanted to. I'm going to choose to put it down below. So I'm going to start a new container now. I'm going to click on the container and I want this to again be one column. I'm going to add in a text box here. And you'll see that the fonts always default to this Proxima Nova. So it is kind of a pain to have to go in and like change it every time. But if you can get this first one set up how you like it and in the correct fonts, it's much easier to like duplicate these boxes once you have it there and then make tweaks from there rather than having to start the formatting from scratch every time. It doesn't always work. It's not always the greatest, but you can get an idea of what I mean there, when you might be able to do that. Okay, so now I have a text box with a container behind it, and you could definitely leave it like this. You could leave it, you know, just below it, but I feel like I want a little more space, a little more padding on the top here. So I'm going to add in and drag in a spacer right here, and I'm going to also do it below. And now you can see when I hover over, if you hover over the container, you can see exactly where the box goes. You'll see that you can see your spacer, your text box, and then your other spacer. The reason I'm doing it on the top and the bottom, even though you may not need it as much right now, is because when you go to mobile, everything's going to sort of get squished. And so we want it to keep the same spacing by using those spacers on the top and the bottom. The next thing I'm going to do is, just because this is my preference, I like it big, I'm going to make it into 100. And then I usually like to do this as 50 here, so that everything just sort of like squishes in. Now I am going to set a background color here for this one. Let's do 969. 96. That one might be too light. All right, I typed that in wrong, but you guys get what I mean. So you could change the background color however you'd like it to be. And for that instance, I'm just going to keep this as is. I'm going to click on preview and just check it again. Right now, there's just like not a good way to see it when you're actually editing because everything gets squished. But then when you come back in, I'm going to also check it on mobile and see what that looks like. If you just drag your screen to be smaller, then you can see how that's going to look. And so I say, okay, great. I'm happy with how that's looking, and I'm going to keep going from there. All right, let me look back at my example here. Okay, so next, once you get the hang of those containers, we are going to add some layers now to those containers to show that we can put two on top of each other. So I'm going to add in another container, and you'll see that this one has the two columns. I'm actually going to add another one here down at the bottom, and I'll show you why in just a minute. This container here, I'm going to change this one to one column, and I want this to be a text box. Let me see if I can copy and paste what I have here. Okay. If you remember, this is the one that was like the client's like current challenges that they're facing, and then their goals. So I am going to put this, you know what, I'm going to actually leave it like that. So I have this container here that I'm going to put a background color on. I'm actually going to go back to using my I have a color picker up here, which you can use also, which is kind of handy. If you click on the color, then you can just copy it and paste it. So it's kind of handy. You don't have to type it every time. It's just a Chrome extension. So I want this top one to be that pink color, but I want this background color to, I'm sorry, this container to have a background image. So I'm going to come into my images over here. I've already preloaded all those images that I've selected, so it's a lot easier now to come in and sort of play around with how this looks. So let me put this one, I'm going to do this image here. So now what I can do is actually drag and drop this container into that column over here on the left-hand side. Now you'll see how it's taking up the entire box. So instead of using spacers this time, I'm going to click on the container, and there's down the bottom, we can control the padding and the margins of that container. So the margins is the outside. So I want more space to be able to see the image behind. So I'm actually going to do, we might need more. I'm going to do 50 on all four sides of that one. Oops, 50. 50. So now see how you can immediately see that a little bit better behind it. I do also like to add in a little bit of padding on the top and the bottom, just so you have some extra space there. And then let's just check that in preview first. Okay, so see how I didn't go all the way full screen? That's okay, we can fix that with the container, but I'm really more just looking at like, does this feel like enough space here? So let me fix that and come back. So I'm gonna click on the back container here and make that one bigger. Let's just check it one more time. Yes, I like how that has some space there. So now that I'm happy with that, now I can click on duplicate and drag this over to the other column. That's just saving me a little bit of time from having to go in and like set all those things again. And then you could also play around with the opacity of this image as well. If you wanted it to be a little bit more like hidden, you could come in and select that same kind of dragger here in the background. And you can also switch it out for different photos and see how they look with something layered on top. Now, depending on what you're using it for, you could do the same thing for this container as well. It may make sense to have it be a little bit like clear on that one, which you can do by clicking on the container and changing that background image. Let me see, I could select this one. So in this example, I wouldn't necessarily do that, but do you see how once I added it in there, it just added a little bit more of a layer. What questions do we have about that so far?
Can you just repeat that just real quickly, just the last 30 seconds, how that last piece happened?
So because we're using two containers, I can control both of the backgrounds of those containers themselves. So when I clicked on this container, I clicked on another image, and that's what changed it out. If I want to get rid of it, if I don't like it, there should be a reset button right up here. Background image, reset, and then I can bring it back to that color. But it's just that layer in the back. That's all. Does that make sense? Are there any other questions about the layering?
Can you hear me?
Yep.
I don't know if it's so much the layering, but when you're bringing the pictures in, is there a way to anchor it in a different spot? Do you know what I mean? So like, suppose like you had the wine glass, you wanted that to be in the center. Can you flip the image around within the container?
That's a good question. You cannot. So these, once we select them, I can't drag and drop and move them around.
Okay.
Yeah, the only thing we can do is play with that like padding, or we could add in some spacers.
Okay.
But
So you have to have your images as you want them when you bring them into here.
Yes. Okay. Yep. Great question. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. I'll show you that too. We're going to go on to the packages in a moment, and I'll show you how that's really important to have the images like prepped and be the same size. Any other questions? All right, so for the next piece, we're going to do the like package display. So again, I'm really trying to plan ahead for mobile. I need to sort of think about how these are going to layer on top of each other. As much as I really, most people are usually on their desktop, but depending again on your industry and what you're sending people, they're usually going to be on their phone. So really keeping in mind like how things are going to layer on top of each other. The containers sort of build from left to right. So if I put something in, let me just put two examples here for a second. If I put in two images, let's say we put that one and this one here. And then let's say down below, I wanted to have this second image here. When I go to show this on mobile now, it's actually going to go in order from this one is going to be number 1. This is going to be number 2. And then this is going to be number 3. Even though I wanted it to go in order like this across the screen, what's going to happen is these are all going to stack on top of each other. And it's sort of reading the left-hand side first and then going over to the right. So I try to keep them as just like two side by side as much as possible inside of those containers. So let me just show you really quick what that would look like on mobile so you can see what I mean. When I shrink that down, you'll see here that's the first image I selected, but then it's going to the one right below it and then the one to the right. So as we create this next container, I'll show you how to avoid that from happening. So let me just start over. I'm going to delete this and I'm going to drag in a new container. I have 3 packages, so I'm going to display those 3 packages here. But I'm actually going to do another container first because I want to layer the containers again. So we have some in the background and then we have a second layer on top. So when I do that, I'm going to click on container and I'm just going to create it down below. So I'm going to click on one and I'm going to put in an image first. And then we're going to use a package in that exact same container. My little thing keeps getting in the way here. Okay, so let's come in to drag a package. And when I drag it in, do you see that line going across? That's actually not going to be in the container. It's going to be down below it. So when I go to move this container, it's not going to come with it, but I want them to. I want them to be connected. So I'm actually now going to drag it inside and you'll see that that green line gets a little bit smaller. And so now you can see that the container green line is going like all the way around. And that's what I want here. Sometimes this happens to me, and if you delete it, it deletes all of it. I don't know why that happens, but let me come in and drag it again. There we go. So it's inside of this container now. So I want to first grab, I'm just going to grab an image. Any image will do here. And then I'm going to select the package that I want. So this is why I said the prep work is really important so that now you can just come in and add it in. So I just made these like sample things here, sample proposals or sample packages. So it's always going to default to this, like the essentials like this right here. But I'm going to keep that same like header font that I've been using, which is the Playfair display for my title. I think I had it set to 30, so I want to try to keep that consistent as much as possible. And then the total here, I'm going to also keep that in Playfair display, but I'm going to do it a little bit smaller. And you know what? I'm going to put that in bold. So now for the packages, there is a smart field that lets you pull in the descriptions, but I don't really love this because you can't control the display or like how it looks. It defaults to these like buttons on there. And let me just click off of it so you can see what I mean. Whoops, hold on. And if you ever do that with the brackets, that's what happens. Okay, so you'll see here, see how it has these bullets and the name of the package again. I don't love that I can't control that. There's no way for me to take that off. I would, for you, does it make more sense for me to use the smart fields? The nice thing about that is you don't ever have to change it. So if you update your package templates in Dubsado, it carries over to everything else inside of your proposals. But if the design is more important to you, then I would say you're just going to have to remember that when you update those proposals, you need to remember to carry it over and copy and paste it here. So what I normally do is I like the design, or I like that I can control the design a little bit better. So I usually come in here and I copy and paste what I have as the description. And I put it into the package elements like as just text, as regular text. So I'm going to do this here. Oops. Okay, there we go. So I'm not going to spend too much time like fixing all this because you can get what I mean. You can understand like the layout here of all of this, but okay, so again, you can sort of weigh that in, but I would always recommend having at least your title and your investment as smart fields so that you don't have to go in and touch that. So in order for this to work, to be able to carry over, we have to use this package element. So that when a client selects this, it then says, okay, this is on their invoice and this is on their contract now. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is I want to put this inside of the container above it. I'm going to drag this big container that I just created and put it into that this left column. So now what I'm going to do is look and see, do I like the spacing? Am I happy with the layout there? And I can sort of play around with all of these little settings depending on the images you have and how much is written inside of your package. I am going to set that back to go completely full screen. The content width you don't have to worry too much about, because in this case, instead of using spacers and things, I want to actually control it with this container itself. Let me actually see if I can pull that back out. I can. So see how that's highlighted green? The reason I'm going to pull it out for a second is because I want to be able to add in some padding here. So it's just a little bit easier to see the second layer of the container. When they're like all up against each other like that, it's a little bit harder to control and see like which one you're doing. So I'm going to add a little padding here. Whoops, not 100. Let's do 10. I'll do some on the left and on the bottom as well. And then I'm just going to add a little tiny baby margin. So let's do like 15. The reason I want to do that is, again, so I can see it in this container, but also just help with the spacing a little bit more. So now I'm going to put it back. And now you can see how there's a little space, and I can see that container much easier. Now, once I'm happy with the design here, however, you can like tweak this all day long. It's, it can be a little cumbersome to like get this set up and how you want it, but make sure you're happy with it here. The reason being, then it's easy to duplicate. So now I can just come over and click duplicate, and another one now has been created at the bottom. And see how, because of that spacing, the little margin there, it again makes it really easy for me to see it. So now I'm just going to drag it over to this second column here. So now they look, the same. All of the settings are the same here. I'm going to do it again with this third container. Now I can come in here and select this different package that I need. So the first one, actually that first one should be the most expensive. So I'll fix that here. So this one should be the VIP. This is the growth plan. And this one should be the essentials. So now you're going to have to go in and tweak these descriptions here because we're not using the smart fields in this case. If you are using the smart fields, it'll all carry over for you. But now you can just change out your pictures and we can preview it and see if we're happy with how it looks. The one thing I was going to say about photos is if you are a wedding planner, let's say, for example, and a lot of different people are sending you images, lots of times what happens is these are different sizes and it may not seem like it initially. Or if you're selecting like different stock images, sometimes they can be all different sizes. What I'll do is I'll put these in Canva and just like a blank document. And I really just put them in there so that I can download them again and then have them all be the exact same size so that I don't have to worry about like this one's a little bit smaller or this one's a little bit bigger. Just a little trick there for you. So let's go look at it now on how it's displayed. And yeah, that looks pretty good. I might make it a little bit tiny bit bigger and have a spacer here. But then when we look on mobile, you'll see that those three containers now are helping us stack those things on top of each other. So your client will first see that first photo and the first package, and then the next photo and the next package, and so on. Rather than seeing like 3 images and then 3 packages below it. Do we have any questions about that? Good, we'll keep going. All right, so the next phase was the like social proof for this social media manager example. I was thinking that you would pull in either a photo of the client or something you've done, like a B-roll behind the scenes, and then show some statistics of what you've done to help them grow on their social media account. So we're going to do something very similar again. We're going to grab that first container, and then we're going to design those other containers to fit inside of it. So most of the time we should have 2 containers. There are some exceptions like the one up here where I had just the text box in here. There's no other container there, but I'll show you why in a second. So these 2 containers here, I'm going to add in another one because I'm going to do one on the left and one on the right. So I'm going to change this one to be 1 again, and it's actually just going to be an image. I am doing it again down below because I want to be able to control this container a little bit easier before I layer it on top with the other one. So I'm going to add some padding again. I'm going to do 20 on top, and I'm going to do 20 on the bottom, but I actually want it to be closer to the middle. So I'm going to do a lot more on the left. I'm going to do, let's say 80 on the left-hand side, and I'm going to leave the right as 0. So let me drag this in here. So now you'll see it's a little more pushed towards the center. So you can control a little bit more where it is in the layout. I'm going to make that container in the background bigger. I'm going to set that to 100 again. And I'm actually going to layer it with an image. So lately I've been liking doing, I was using this example as the background, where you sort of use the same image as the background and the one that's here, but it's a little bit like blurred and hidden, of course, in the background here because we're going to layer things. But let's set this opacity probably to like, let's say like 40, so it covers it up a little. And then for this image, I'm going to select the exact same one. So it just kind of gives it a little dimension there on the front side. I had never done that before. It just sort of creatively hit me one day and I was like, oh, that's fun to have it there. So now I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to duplicate this container so I don't have to start from scratch and keep everything, the settings that I've already started, just to save a little time. So it'll default to below it. I'm going to drag it over. But this time I actually want a text box. So you'll see here when I hover over it, see how there's 2 trash cans? I'm going to actually just delete the one that's the image. Now I'm going to add in a text box here. Let me see if I can grab in I had some text already set up on the other one. So I'm going to copy and paste that in. So again, you could like copy and paste one from above and keep that same formatting with the fonts and everything like that and the colors. But just for this example, I'm not going to worry too much about this. So we have this container here now, but remember we pushed it over to one side. So now I just need to reverse it. I want it to be on the other side. So when I click on the container over on the bottom here, I'm going to switch it so that the left-hand margin is now 0, but the right-hand margin is 80. And that's going to make it so that it comes in to each other. So we'll just see how that looks. Okay, so 2 things here. I don't like how this image is a little bit too big. I want to make it a little bit smaller, but I might add a little more padding at the top just to add some extra of that background. So you can do that by coming in and clicking on the image. And there is a percentage button down here at the bottom. You have to be, a scale. You have to click on that image for this to come up here at the bottom. It defaults to this 0, but it's really at that like in between. It's not 100. It's not 90. It's like 98. For whatever reason, this is how it defaults. I don't really know why, but you can play around with how big you'd like it to be. Let's say we want it to be down to 80%. But remember, it's going to look a little bit funky on this one until you test what it looks like in preview in that big screen. But I do remember that I want to add some padding to that container. So let me add, let's say 20 to the top and the bottom. I'm not so concerned about the other sides because we already handled that with the margins. While I'm here, I'm going to actually do one more thing. So in the example I showed you, I actually used another container inside of this box. And this time I'm going to keep it as the 2. So I'm going to leave it here to sort of showcase like some statistics. So let's just say we're going to do the example I said was 150% increase in engagement. And I'm going to make this big. So once you're happy with that, again, you can duplicate so you don't have to start over. You don't have to keep doing that again and again. So we'll move it over. And I can actually do this again where I'm going to duplicate it. But remember this container, see how when I hover above it, there's that separate container. This one has that margin, but this one below it does not. So when I add a new container, I need to add those same settings, at least to the right-hand side. So I'm going to say 80 on that one. So let's test it and see what it looks like now. Okay, so that looks pretty evenly spaced now with it next to each other. But again, you can like play around with this. This just comes from practice, from like getting the sense of like how big things are going to be or how small. But yeah, I'd be pretty happy with that. If I wanted to keep this image bigger, you could duplicate this one here and have it be like a second layer. What questions do we have about that? All right, let's move on to the next phase. The next one is actually pretty simple. This next part was a testimonial. So I'm going to do the exact same thing like I did in that first introduction, where I'm just going to use one container this time. I'm going to set it to 1. You can just add a text box here. You could actually layer them if you wanted to, but I feel like you don't need to. This will make it so it's about 50% there. In this case, I set it to black. So I have a black background here. So you'll see here how the text is still white. I'm sorry, it's still black. You can change it to text color here just by clicking and selecting that. I do find that sometimes it doesn't always show up when you're editing, when you use this text color right here for whatever reason. It always works in preview, but you don't always see it when you're editing. The other thing you can do is just select it here, and you can also just change the color inside of it. This seems to be a little more reliable for whatever reason, but just so you know, it does the same exact things. I feel like that's the key to Dubsado is there are lots of ways to do the exact same thing. So sometimes it gets really confusing which one you should or shouldn't use. But let's just pretend that's a great testimonial. We formatted everything. You know what, I'm going to put this in the chat so you guys can see what I'm looking at here. I should have done that in the beginning, but you can see the example I'm building off of. I chose to like keep it smaller, but you could play around with if you like the full screen, or the smaller screen is fine too. All right, so let's see if we can get through these last few things here. So let's jump to, I'm going to jump to the behind the brand, because this one is a little bit trickier, or maybe I would say more advanced because we're doing lots of containers here. We're actually going to use 3 containers to layer them on top of each other to give that like 3 different colors. So I'm actually going to start by just clicking on the container button 3 times. And when I'm thinking about layering, I'm going to have one in the back that I want to be one specific color. Then I want to add another box that's a different color. So this one is going to be 1. Let's just say, let me grab that color from up here. Let's say this background color is the dark one. I'll set it to be full. And I'm going to set this one to white. And I'm going to set this to 1 as well, but I am going to keep it a little bit smaller so that I can find it. If I put it right on top of it, it's going to sometimes be like so that they're back to back, and it's going to be hard to move them off. So let me now drag it inside of this one here. And I'm going to actually add in some padding as well and some margins so we can find things. I'm going to actually make that a lot bigger. Let's do 50. 50. And we can play around with the left and the right after. But now we have these two containers on top of each other. And I'm going to recreate the behind the brand piece. So I actually am going to need 2 columns in there. But if I want to keep that layer in the back, this is going to stay as 1. And this new container that we put on top is going to create 2. I know that's a little confusing. So let me just... For this example, I'm just going to go with this container here, and I'll tell you why in a second. But let's say I'm going to put in a text box, and I like to call it the behind the brand. I don't think it's a bad thing to talk more about you and like give them a little like tidbit, but like I keep saying, like, remember at this point, they already know you. So like give them something new or something that they don't know about you to think about in this section here, rather than just saying the exact same thing that's already on your like about page or that you've told them on a call, but sort of give them something else to think about or why they would want to work with you here. So my pause was because I could definitely put another container inside of here so I can control this image a little bit more, just like we've been doing above with the padding and with all the margins. I just want to show you how these could go together. So once we have these 2 columns now, there's no background image set to this one here. So it's just going to take on this color that I set from the other container. So you can see how those are all 3 layered there on top of each other. Does that make sense? Any questions about that?
Am I right that the other layer is really, there's nothing else going on? It's just to set it up?
Yep,
Right?
exactly.
The one that's kind of right behind this picture one, but in front of the brown or taupe.
Yes, exactly.
Okay.
Yep.
All right.
All it's doing is just holding that white color for me, and I could make it any color I want.
Okay.
But yeah, that's really its only purpose. You could also do the image as well. Like you could create a background image if you wanted to. I don't usually at this point, but you could. Like you could layer them like that as well and make the opacity lower. Kind of cool. Any other questions? So you'll see in my example, like it's much more refined because I am also using the containers inside of this. So I actually put these in, and I'll mess around with like the padding and the spacing and all of that. So you can do that as well on your own, but I feel like we've talked about that. So I just don't want to waste your time doing that again. But you'll see that that's why it has a little more like spacing around it. But yeah, that's really the big keys to everything, is like having those containers on containers on containers. That's how you can control everything that's going on. So the last step now is those details. So this is what I was mentioning, where if you need to gather a client address, or if you need a venue address, or you need any specific details that you don't already have from your lead capture form, this is the place where you should be collecting that information. We don't want to put it on a contract as an open field. So if you have those on there, we need to take them off, and we need to make sure that we have them all mapped here on your proposal. So I usually call it your details, but you can call it whatever you'd like. And I should put this in a container, but you don't have to. It's not going to change too much here, but sort of just like keeping the best practice, I guess, for using these. I just want to have that your details going across the top, so I'm going to leave that alone. Now, this is where those like container layers are really important. So I am going to put in a short answer field here, and again on the right-hand side. So because I know I need to ask more questions and do the same thing, I'm going to duplicate this so I don't have to do it again. So remember, the container is going to read this side first, the left side first, and then the right side. So I want this to be first name. I want that to be required. And then I am going to map it to the last name. I'm sorry, to the client first name here. And then this will be last name required and client last name. So the reason I'm doing that is you probably already have that information. We probably acknowledge them above with a smart field. That's totally fine. I just like to have it there in case they want to make any changes, or like maybe they didn't capitalize it or something like that. I like to give them the opportunity to have access to it again. Most of the time it's come in from your lead capture and they don't have to actually fill it in again. As long as it's mapped there, they won't have to touch it. So if they filled it out and said, Kelly McCracken, it will actually show on the proposal as Kelly McCracken if you're sending it from their project. Now, the next one I usually always include is email and phone number. So you get the idea here. I'm just mapping and making sure that I have everything here. Now, this is the one where people never include this here and they always do it on the contract. But for address, you can do it the 2 layers as well, but I just like to do it as 4. Usually it's not as long, the street address. And again, depending on your clients, most of the time, this is going to be their home address just for like really contract purposes, just to make sure it's there. So when you select the smart field, I usually just use address line 1. And then you can do same thing with city, state, and zip code. If you needed their like venue address, for example, see how I can no longer duplicate this? It's because this is now mapped on the back end. So Dubsado is saying I can't have 2 of those. We can only have 1, so I can't duplicate it anymore. So that's why I do it in the beginning, to get it all ready to go. So I'm just going to do that so we don't have to start over. Sometimes it's not going to let me. So I'm going to start over. So when I go back into here, if I'm going to do it for the venue, I would select the project location down below. You'll see here the project fields, and I would use the project address if I was talking about the location where we were going, or anything that would need to be in a contract for some reason. I don't like to give clients control of your calendar here. I would never give them like the date select on a proposal. You can use the smart field that says like project start date on blah, 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 or, wedding date, blah, blah, blah. But I would never put this here to let them make any controlling things over that. You should be in control of when they're booking this with that package with you, just so you know. Sometimes I'll put it up here at the top that just says project name, project date, but they would need to reach out to you if they need a different date. Do we have any other questions about this? This is a really important step in your proposal.
This part I feel really comfortable with. It's all the creative stuff that you did for the first half that was very inspiring to me, just to note. But I trial and error. I have learned these pieces, so thank you.
For sure. Yeah. No, it just takes some practice and some time, but I agree. Yeah, it's good to see like different examples. I always like to look at other people's proposals and see what they came up with as well. I think the last thing I was just going to mention here was that these short answers are the only ones that you can use this field mapping for. You cannot use them for any of the like free response. So if you're not seeing it, it's probably because you're not using the short answer. Okay, I think we covered everything, but if you have any questions, I'm happy to answer them at any point. So as I mentioned in the beginning, or if you just joined, I just put this presentation together so you can refer back to those things that I was talking about, and see some more examples of some other things that you could try on your own. But I'm confident once you get the hang of containers, it's like really the biggest hurdle, I think, to learn everything. So I do have templates in my shop that are on sale for the next 5 days. They're going to be 30% off for you guys only. You can use that code 30 off. So if you try this and you're like, I just don't want to worry about padding and containers and all of that, they are for sale in my shop, and I'll send you that link as well. But I'm so thankful you guys are here. Like I said, I've been wanting to do this for a long time. I think it's one of those best features of Dubsado that people don't always know how to use. So I'd love to see what you create and what you come up with. You can always follow me on Instagram or send me a message. I'd love to hear from you. And I think that is everything. Yeah, there are 2 affiliate links here. If you're new to Dubsado, I do have a 30% off code. And the images that you saw today were from Hot Stock if you were interested in purchasing them or looking at all of their collections. But I'll send this to you guys as well.
That was great. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank
I'm
you
so
very
glad it was
much,
helpful.
Kelly.
You're welcome. We got it in under, well, almost an hour. So that was pretty good.
Did good. Thank you so
Lots to cover.
much.
Yes,
This is
thank
really
you guys.
helpful. Thanks, Kelly.
You're welcome. Thank you, everyone. I'll send out the recording, but please let me know if you have any questions.
All right.
Thank you.
Sounds good. Thank you.
We'll talk to you soon.